Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the Conservatives are getting desperate about their attempts to rig the general election after the Electoral Commission conclude that the latest rules on voter ID have prevented a lot of eligible voters from voting. The Tories could never really claim that they were solving a problem because the problem was always invented. So now they claim that they were stopping eligible British people from voting as a challenge to China. I wish I were kidding. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, with voter suppression back in the news, as the Electoral Commission published their final report this week, the Tories are fishing around for an excuse. The Chinese are our new enemy. I know, let's blame them. But it is as obvious as it is stupid. First of all, who's really going to believe that the government implemented voter suppression in order to thwart Chinese infiltration? Foreign powers infiltrate governments directly because you only need to corrupt a few individuals to do so. They do not infiltrate elections because you would need hundreds of thousands of agents. Also, if their voter ID nonsense was to thwart malign foreign infiltration, why didn't they say that when they were introducing it? Now, like I say, another Tory lie that is as obvious as it is stupid. If the Tories want to stop foreign powers gaining undue influence over our politics, stop taking their money and stop hiding the money trail. Now, this latest excuse is in response to the fact that the Electoral Commission have completed their report onto the May local elections, including the impact, for the first time, of requiring voters to produce certain types of ID to be able to vote, without any serious campaign to inform people of the need or how they could obtain the ID because the list was inconsistent, to say the least. The Tories got away with it largely because too many people think, oh, it's a very reasonable thing to do in a country where the Tories in particular object to people having ID. Like during the last Labour government, there were thoughts given to introducing national ID, but it was shelved as too unpopular, driven largely by opposition from the Tories and their client media. Then there was the question of, so if you looked at the lists of acceptable ID for the elections, why are there so many elderly persons' ID on it and so few young persons? Especially when the IDs were equivalent. Like elderly person's Oyster card, oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. Young person's Oyster card, oh, that'd be ridiculous. No, of course we can't accept that. The government argued that there were more IDs on there for elderly people. Well, because elderly people they're less likely to have voter ID, you see. Well, even if this were true, and I don't know that it is true, it's still a nonsense argument. The Tories were arguing that these measures were needed to protect the sanctity of the ballot box. So the relative proportion of different groups having photo ID is irrelevant. Either the ID you accept is secure or it is not. So how can one particular ID be secure if it happens to be in the hands of an elderly person, but not secure if the same ID, acquired in pretty much the same way, is acquired by a young person? Then Jacob Rees-Mogg just let the cat out of the bag. In the wake of the local election results, which did not go the Tories' way, he basically admitted that the move was a deliberate attempt by the government to rig the results in their favour. The word he used was gerrymandering, although that is completely the wrong word, so I won't bother repeating it. But he said, yes, this was an attempt for us to rig the elections. Jacob Rees-Mogg was a cabinet minister at the time these plans were going through Parliament. So either he was lying or he was actually explaining what was being discussed right at the top of government, that this was a voter suppression plan, as many of us had said from the start. And if Jacob Rees-Mogg was lying, and he has been known, wouldn't you have expected a very loud chorus of his, at the time, cabinet colleagues denying it? Go, no, of course we weren't discussing this. Of course that's not what the plan was. No, that chorus did not emerge. And now the Electoral Commission have finalised a report which notes that a lot of voters were turned away, largely down to two reasons. First, not having the prescribed forms of ID. And second, not being aware that they needed any particular type of ID. Now, in the first case, it was the government's job to make sure all eligible voters had the ID. Not hiding details of how to get it in the bottom filing cabinet in a darkened room with no steps guarded by a panther. Now, they had to make sure that everyone had access to this ID. Like, for example, the government require us to have national insurance numbers. So do you know what? They make sure we have national insurance numbers. If we need certain types of ID to vote, they should have made sure we had it. Not just said, oh, there's this way to get it. No, no, no. You make sure everyone's got it. As to the second case, all it needed was a leaflet through every door specifically informing people that they needed types of ID to vote and how to get it. That way they could have at least claimed to be trying to inform people, but that did not occur. It's also been noted that the majority of those impacted are exactly as intended by the Conservatives, groups who are very unlikely to vote Conservative. Those renting from a social landlord, those with disabilities, the unemployed, those from lower social grades. That's what the Electoral Commission say. A who's who of the people that the Tories do not want voting has been highlighted by the Electoral Commission as being particularly affected. The Commission said that about 14,000 people turned up to the polling station but could not be issued with a ballot paper. Now, let me just explain exactly what they mean by that. 14,000 people got as far as the polling station and then were told that they couldn't have a ballot. So they had to get all the way through there. So that is only counting those who went right up to the people handing out the ballots. How many more found out too late to get ID that they needed ID? So the day before, say, and never went to the polling station. They weren't counted. How many did attend the polling station but were still not counted? Because there was a particular scandal at the time that some officials, at least, were checking ID before people went into the polling station. Like as the queues formed saying, oh, have you got your ID? So they were turning people away and not recording them because unless they actually got their way to inside the polling station, there was no way of recording those people. In other words, this 14,000 is just the number of stolen votes officially recorded. And then you consider that the local elections are nowhere near as well attended as a general election. In a way, it's good that the local elections were the trial run because some people can now be forewarned. But if people remain ignorant about what's just happened, then the potential for way more people to be disenfranchised during the much more important and much better attended general election next year is huge. The Electoral Commission say they've got recommendations for the government. Now, call me cynical. I do not see many, if any, of these being implemented. What about you? The only good news, really, not that it's really good news, but maybe an absence of news that's as bad as it could be, is that this didn't help the Tories nearly enough during the local elections because they still lost, and they still lost them worse than they expected. And their trajectory for the general election is so awful that it should still not stop them getting a thumping next year. After which the dial can then be moved the other way on voter engagement. Not only will there be action to tackle this, and that's clear without Labour even saying so, because it's obviously in Labour's interest to do so, but we'll be expanding the electorate as well. You know, this attempt at voter suppression would have been highly pernicious. If we were headed for a tight election, it would be of much more concern. It is still offensive that eligible voters were not able to vote and will not be able to vote, and that it might save a few Tory seats. But it at least won't be enough to save them nationally. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.